The morning markets of Aurelian City woke slowly, like a machine that had not yet decided whether it preferred peace or chaos. Cargo ships hummed overhead in neat traffic lanes, carved into the pale blue sky, their engines whispering softly as they glided between towers of polished alloy and glass. Below them, on the wide circular trading platforms that formed the outer market ring, merchants began opening stalls one by one. The scent of spices from the desert moons mixed strangely with the metallic tang of ion engines. Somewhere a trader argued loudly with a translation drone that insisted his insult was grammatically incorrect. A group of tourists from a low-gravity colony bounced slightly with every step, looking deeply suspicious of the planet's normal gravity, as if it were personally responsible for their discomfort. In the middle of this cheerful confusion stood Owen's bakery stall. It was small, slightly crooked, and permanently dusted with flour. Owen liked it that way. He stood behind the counter, sleeves rolled to his elbows, staring thoughtfully at the small oven beside him. "Come on," he muttered to it. "We talked about this yesterday. If you burn another batch, I'm replacing you with a toaster." The oven beeped politely. Owen squinted at it. "I don't trust that tone." A tiny service drone hovering near the stall spoke in a pleasant voice. "Reminder, the oven does not possess emotions." "That's exactly what it wants you to believe," Owen replied. The drone paused for 2 seconds. "I am unsure how to respond to that." "That's all right," Owen said. "Neither am I." The bakery stall was famous in the outer market for two things. The first was Owen's pastries, which were warm, soft, and somehow tasted better than food that cost 10 times as much inside the central districts. The second was Owen himself, specifically the fact that he talked to his equipment like it was a team of unreliable coworkers. By midday, the stall had already sold most of its stock. Dock workers, pilots, merchants, and wandering travelers passed by in a steady stream. Some came because the pastries were good. Others came because Owen occasionally argued with his mixer, and that was surprisingly entertaining. A tall alien trader with shimmering bronze skin leaned against the counter while eating a pastry. "You know," the trader said, chewing thoughtfully, "if you expanded to 3 locations, you could become very wealthy." Owen shook his head. "Too much paperwork. You could hire people. Too many people. You could automate." Owen looked at his oven. "No offense," he said carefully, "but machines are already pushing their luck." The oven beeped again. The trader laughed and left. Eventually, the rush faded. Afternoon sunlight filtered through the tall structures surrounding the market ring. The noise softened as traders began packing up equipment and scanning inventory drones back into storage. Owen checked the tray beside the oven. One pastry remained, a small cake. It was slightly uneven, golden on the edges, and smelled like sweet citrus. Owen stared at it for a moment. "Well," he said to the oven, "looks like dinner." The oven beeped approvingly. Before Owen could pick it up, a small voice spoke from the other side of the counter. "Is that your last one?" Owen looked up. A little girl stood there. She appeared almost human at first glance, but the difference was clear the moment he noticed her ears. They were long and elegant, tapering slightly to soft points that curved gently behind her head. She looked no older than 6 or 7. Her dark hair was slightly messy, as if it had been running through the wind for hours. Her clothes were simple but unusually well made, the fabric faintly shimmering with embedded micro threads that Owen recognized as expensive technology. But what caught his attention most was her expression. She was staring at the cake with the intense focus of someone studying a rare artifact. Owen glanced behind her. No parents, no guards, just the drifting crowds of the afternoon market. "Well," Owen said slowly, "technically, yes." The girl leaned slightly closer to the counter. "It smells important." "Important?" "Yes," she said seriously. "Like a cake with purpose." Owen rubbed his chin. "That was not my original design philosophy." The girl continued staring at the cake. Her stomach growled loudly. She immediately placed both hands over it, as if hoping no one had heard. Owen definitely heard. He sighed. "Well," he said, cutting the cake in half, "every cake deserves a meaningful destiny." He slid one half across the counter. The girl blinked. "You're giving it to me? You look hungry." She took the cake carefully, as if accepting a scientific sample. Then she took a bite. Her eyes widened. This is extremely acceptable. That's the best compliment I've received today. She ate the rest quickly, clearly trying not to look too enthusiastic and failing completely. After finishing, she wiped her hands and looked up at him thoughtfully. You didn't ask anything. About what? She tilted her head slightly. Who I am. Owen shrugged. You were hungry. That was the important part. The girl studied him for a long moment. Then she said very calmly, Do you know my mother is the queen? Owen froze. His brain considered several possibilities. A joke? A misunderstanding? A child with an impressive imagination? He laughed nervously. That's nice. The girl continued watching him. Her expression didn't change. Owen slowly stopped laughing. Ha, you're not joking, are you? She took another small bite of cake. No. Far above the market, in the silent sky lanes of Aurelian City, several palace security ships abruptly changed course. Owen stood perfectly still behind his stall, the half-empty pastry tray in front of him, and the small alien girl calmly chewing cake across the counter. For several long seconds, he said nothing. His brain was busy rearranging information in increasingly alarming ways. Queen, mother, child currently eating his last cake. He cleared his throat. Right, he said carefully. And my oven is secretly a warship. The oven beeped. The girl finished chewing and looked at him with patient seriousness. My mother is Queen Vessa of the Aurelian Dominion. Owen blinked. That sounds very official. Yes. And powerful. Yes. And slightly terrifying. She tilted her head. She can be. Owen rubbed his face slowly. He had lived in Aurelian City long enough to know that Queen Vessa was not the type of ruler people casually mentioned while eating street pastries. She was the ruler of an entire interstellar dominion. Ships listened when she spoke. Governors argued very carefully around her. Entire diplomatic councils had once paused for 10 minutes because she raised one eyebrow. Owen looked down at the girl again. She had crumbs on her chin. You're serious, he said quietly. Yes. You're absolutely certain your mother is the queen? Yes. You're not just saying that because you want another cake. She glanced at the tray. There are no more cakes. That is correct. The girl nodded thoughtfully. Then lying would not improve my situation? Owen sighed. That's disturbingly logical. She finished the last bite and licked a little frosting from her finger. My name is Mira. Owen. They looked at each other for a moment. Then Owen leaned forward slightly. All right, Mira, hypothetically speaking. Yes? If you were the daughter of the most powerful person on this planet? Yes? Wouldn't you normally have guards, advisors, security drones, and possibly a small fleet of warships nearby? Mira considered this. Yes. Owen slowly pointed around the market. I do not currently see those things. That is because I left them. You left them. Yes. How? I walked. Owen stared. You walked away from royal security. Yes. That seems like a design flaw in the system. She shrugged. They underestimate how small I am. That is not comforting. Mira leaned slightly on the counter. I wanted to see the city without everyone behaving strangely. They behave strangely? Yes. When people know who I am, they become very careful. Owen nodded. That sounds accurate. They bow. That also sounds accurate. They call me Your Highness. I assume that part is correct. It is very boring. Owen chuckled. Most people would enjoy that. I prefer normal conversations. You came to the outer market for normal conversations. Yes, that is a bold strategy. She pointed at the oven. You argue with your equipment. It started the argument. I believe you. Owen folded his arms. So you escaped the palace, wandered into the busiest market district on the planet, and decided to test random bakery stalls. Yes, that feels extremely unsafe. She tapped the counter. I was running an experiment. Owen immediately looked suspicious. I do not like the word experiment when I am involved. It was simple. Please tell me it did not involve explosions. No. Good. I wanted to know if someone would help a hungry child without asking who they were. Owen paused. That's the experiment. Yes. And if I said no, then I would continue walking. To another bakery? Probably. Owen scratched his head. So your scientific method involves pastries? Yes. I respect that. A delivery drone floated past the stall carrying crates of glowing fruit. The pilot inside glanced toward Owen, saw the quiet conversation, and continued on without interest. For a moment, the market seemed perfectly normal. Then Mira asked, "Were you worried I could be someone important?" Owen shrugged. Everyone is someone important to somebody. She studied him. That answer is statistically unusual. That sounds like something a princess would say. I am technically a princess. Please stop reminding me. Mira smiled slightly. You panicked for a moment. I did not panic. You froze. That was strategic thinking. You looked like a statue, a thoughtful statue, an anxious statue. Owen sighed. All right, maybe a little panic. She leaned closer. Why did you give me the cake? You looked hungry. You did not ask who I was. That felt rude. You did not ask if I could pay. You're a child. She pointed toward the empty tray. And now you have no dinner. That is a personal tragedy, yes. Was it worth it? Owen leaned back and shrugged. If a kid is hungry and you have cake, the math is pretty simple. That is not how most people behave. Well, most people are wrong about cake math. Mira laughed quietly. You are strange. I've been told. High above the market, something moved. At first it was only a distant hum, then another, and another. Owen didn't notice. Mira did. She glanced briefly toward the sky. Several tiny silver shapes were approaching, fast between the city towers. She returned her attention to Owen. I think my experiment worked. That's good. You passed. I did not know I was taking a test. Most honest results come from unplanned tests. That sounds like a rule invented by children. Sometimes children are correct. Owen sighed and leaned on the counter. Well, Mira, if your mother really is the queen, a loud mechanical voice suddenly echoed across the market. Royal security operation in progress. Owen slowly closed his eyes. I'm going to assume that announcement is unrelated to us. Mira smiled. It is probably about me. Owen opened one eye. Probably. Above them, several armored security ships descended rapidly toward the market ring. The humming sound above the market changed quickly from distant noise to something far more serious. Owen slowly lifted his head and looked toward the sky. Several silver ships were descending between the tall buildings of the city like sharp metal birds that had suddenly decided gravity was optional. Their engines glowed softly, pushing controlled waves of air downward that rattled hanging signs and fluttered the cloth banners of nearby stalls. Merchants began looking up. A fruit vendor dropped 3 glowing melons. Someone shouted something in a language Owen did not recognize, which sounded suspiciously like a curse directed at royalty. Owen turned back to Mira. Please tell me those ships are delivering pastries. They are not. Of course they are not. The ships stopped above the market ring, hovering with perfect mechanical patience. Their hulls carried the royal crest of the Aurelian Dominion, a circular star surrounded by 3 orbiting lines of silver light. Owen swallowed. That is very official. Yes, Mira said calmly. A moment later, several armored transports descended beside the ships. Their landing engines released controlled bursts of air that pushed dust and flour across the market floor. Owen's bakery sign fell over. That sign cost me 12 credits, he muttered. The first transport door opened. Armored guards stepped out. They moved with the kind of quiet precision that suggested they had trained for years to enter rooms dramatically. Their armor was dark blue and silver, lined with glowing circuitry that pulsed softly as they scanned the area. Several citizens quickly decided they had urgent business somewhere else. One merchant pulled his stall closed so quickly that he accidentally trapped himself inside it. A hovering security drone projected a bright scanning grid across the market. Royal Protection Unit active, the drone announced. Owen looked at Mira. Is this still part of your experiment? Yes. I preferred the cake portion of the experiment. The guards spread through the market with controlled efficiency. One of them raised a scanning device that projected a rotating, holographic sphere above his wrist. The sphere flashed green, then red, then green again. The guard turned. His helmet slowly pointed toward Owen's bakery stall. Owen followed the direction of the helmet. Then he sighed. Of course. The guard walked forward with two others behind him. Their boots made heavy metallic sounds against the stone floor. Owen leaned toward Mira and whispered, hypothetically speaking, if I panic and run, how far would I get? Not far. Good to know. The lead guard stopped a few meters from the stall. For a moment, nobody spoke. Then the guard removed his helmet. He was a tall alien man with pale silver skin and the same long, elegant ears Mira had. His expression was calm but carried the quiet exhaustion of someone who had spent several hours searching an entire city. Princess Mira, he said carefully. Mira waved. Hello, Commander Tarek. Owen's shoulders slowly collapsed. See, Princess. The commander glanced briefly at Owen before returning his attention to Mira. You left the palace security grid 3 hours ago. Yes. You disabled 2 surveillance drones. They were watching me. That is their purpose. I did not like it. Behind the commander, several guards continued scanning the surrounding market stalls. One of them pointed a device toward Owen's oven. The oven beeped nervously. It's not dangerous, Owen said quickly. It burned 12 pastries this morning, but we've discussed the issue. The guard slowly lowered the scanner. Commander Tarek sighed softly. Princess, the palace has been searching the entire city. I know. You triggered 3 security alerts. Yes. Your mother is extremely concerned. Mira crossed her arms. She worries too much. Owen raised one hand. I would like to officially support the Queen's position. Tarek finally looked directly at Owen. For a long moment, the commander simply studied him. Owen attempted a polite smile. It came out looking slightly like someone trying not to faint. You are the human who fed her, Tarek said. That is technically correct. You did not ask who she was? No. You did not request payment? No. You did not notify authorities? Owen paused. That last option did not occur to me. Mira stepped forward suddenly. He passed. The guards behind Tarek shifted slightly. Owen blinked. Passed what? My experiment, Mira said proudly. Tarek rubbed his forehead slowly. Princess, palace security procedures are not experiments. This one was. You evaluated a random civilian. Yes. You left the palace without protection. Yes. You ate street food. Mira thought for a moment. It was very good street food. Owen nodded. Thank you. Tarek closed his eyes briefly. I will need to explain this to the Queen. Owen leaned toward Mira again. That sentence worries me. She smiled. Do not worry. That is easy for you to say. You helped. I gave you cake. You treated me like a normal person. That seemed polite. Tarek opened his eyes again and looked at Owen. You shared your food with a stranger. Owen shrugged. She was hungry. Yes. That seemed like the important part. The commander studied him again. Then he looked at Mira. You intend to defend him? Yes. He could have used your identity for advantage. He did not. He could have contacted authorities. He did not. He could have refused you. He did not. Mira looked back at Owen. You passed. Owen slowly pointed at the descending security ships. I feel like passing should involve fewer armed vehicles. Suddenly, another voice spoke through the commander's communication device. Commander Tarek. The commander touched the side of his armor. Yes, Your Majesty. Owen froze. Mira smiled brightly. Oh, good. Owen whispered slowly. That sounded like the Queen. Tarek listened silently for several seconds. Then he lowered his hand. The Queen has reviewed the surveillance recordings. Owen felt his stomach drop. That sounds bad. Tarek looked directly at him. The Queen wishes to meet the baker. Owen stared. Today? Yes. Owen looked at Mira. She smiled. You passed the test. Owen sighed. I should have eaten the cake. The ride to the palace was surprisingly quiet. Owen had expected chains, alarms, and possibly a long speech about how feeding royalty without permission violated at least 7 laws of the Aurelian Dominion. Instead, he found himself sitting inside a sleek security transport that hummed gently through the sky lanes above the city. Mira sat across from him, swinging her legs slightly while looking out the window, as if this were a perfectly normal afternoon. To Owen, it felt less normal. Far below them, the massive city of Aurelian stretched across the planet like a living machine. Towers curved toward the sky, connected by glowing transport bridges. Cargo ships drifted between the structures in organized streams, guided by invisible navigation grids. Owen pressed his face closer to the window. "I have lived here 12 years," he said quietly, "and I have never seen the city from this angle." Mira smiled. "You normally do not travel by royal security ship." "That is correct." Commander Tarek stood near the cockpit, arms folded behind his back. Two other guards sat silently near the door, their helmets resting beside them. The interior of the transport was far too clean for Owen's comfort. His clothes still carried traces of flour, and he kept the strange feeling that he might accidentally bake something just by breathing. He glanced at Mira. "So, hypothetically speaking, yes? If the Queen dislikes me," Mira tilted her head. "Yes? What happens?" She thought for a moment. "That would be unfortunate." "That is not a comforting answer." "Do not worry. I worry professionally." She leaned forward slightly. "My mother is curious about you." "That sounds like the beginning of many historical disasters." Mira laughed quietly. "You think too dramatically." Owen looked around the transport. "I am currently being escorted by armored guards in a royal security ship to meet the most powerful person on the planet." "That is accurate. Drama feels appropriate." The ship slowed slightly as they approached the inner districts of the city. Ahead of them rose the palace. Owen had seen it before, of course. Everyone in Aurelian City had. But seeing it from the air was different. The structure was enormous, rising from the center of the city like a mountain of silver stone and living light. Layers of curved architecture spiraled upward in elegant rings, each level surrounded by gardens, landing platforms, and shimmering shield arrays. Several large warships floated quietly above the upper towers, like silent guardians. Owen stared. "That is excessive." Mira followed his gaze. "It is practical." "Practical for what?" "Occasional planetary defense." Owen nodded slowly. "Of course." The transport passed through a transparent energy barrier surrounding the palace airspace. The shield shimmered briefly around the hull before allowing them through. Owen leaned back in his seat. "Out of curiosity," he asked, "how many security systems did you bypass to leave the palace this morning?" Mira counted on her fingers. "6. Tarek turned his head slightly. "7. Mira frowned. "Oh yes, I forgot the elevator scanner." Owen closed his eyes. "That elevator deserves a medal." The transport finally descended onto a landing platform halfway up the palace structure. As the doors opened, a cool breeze moved through the chamber, carrying the scent of unfamiliar alien flowers from the surrounding gardens. Owen stepped out slowly. The landing platform alone was larger than the entire outer market ring. Tall columns curved upward into the ceiling, glowing faintly with embedded technology that shifted color like distant stars. Several elegant aerial drones drifted silently above the platform, monitoring the area. Owen looked around. "Well," he said softly, "my bakery is slightly smaller than this." Mira walked beside him with relaxed confidence, clearly comfortable here. Guards lined the pathway ahead, standing in calm formation. As Owen walked past them, he noticed something strange. They were all watching him, not suspiciously, curiously. One of them leaned slightly toward another guard and whispered something Owen could not hear. Owen whispered to Mira, "Why are they staring? You are the baker." "Yes. You fed the princess." "That was before I knew she was a princess." "That is why they are curious." Owen sighed. "Wonderful." They entered the palace interior through a massive archway. The inside of the palace was even more impressive. Wide halls stretched endlessly beneath ceilings, filled with soft floating lights. Walls of smooth alloy reflected gentle patterns of color that shifted as people moved through the space. Strange alien plants grew in carefully arranged gardens along the corridors, their leaves glowing faintly with bioluminescent patterns. Several palace attendants paused as the group passed. One of them blinked twice while looking at Owen's flower-covered sleeve. Another quietly activated a small cleaning drone that followed Owen politely at ankle height, attempting to remove flour particles from the air around him. Owen looked down at it. Is that drone cleaning me? Mira nodded. Yes. I feel judged. They continued through several corridors until they reached a large circular chamber. The doors opened silently. Inside, the room was calm and bright, filled with soft, natural light from tall, transparent windows that overlooked the city below. At the far end of the chamber stood a single elevated platform, and upon that platform stood Queen Vessa. She was tall and composed, her long ears rising elegantly through dark silver hair that flowed down her shoulders. Her clothing was refined but powerful, a mixture of royal armor and ceremonial fabric woven with delicate glowing threads. She did not move when they entered. She simply watched. Owen stopped walking. That is definitely the Queen. Mira smiled and walked forward. Hello, Mother. Queen Vessa's calm eyes shifted briefly toward Owen, then back to her daughter. Mira, she said quietly. Her voice carried easily across the chamber. You left the palace without permission. Yes. You disabled security drones. They were annoying. You caused a citywide alert. That was not intentional. The Queen sighed softly. Then her gaze moved slowly toward Owen again. For a moment, she simply studied him. Owen attempted another respectful bow. It was slightly better than the first one, but not much. Hello, he said. The Queen's expression did not change. You are the baker, she said calmly. Owen nodded. Yes. She tilted her head slightly. You gave my daughter your last cake. Owen thought carefully about his next words. Yes. Why? Owen hesitated. Then he shrugged slightly. She looked hungry. For a moment, the entire chamber was silent. Then Queen Vessa did something unexpected. She smiled. The smile appeared slowly, as if Queen Vessa herself had not entirely expected it. Owen noticed two things at once. First, the Queen's smile was calm, almost amused. Second, every guard in the room suddenly looked deeply uncomfortable, as if they had just witnessed a rare astronomical event. Owen cleared his throat. I hope that answer was correct. Queen Vessa stepped down from the platform with quiet grace. Her presence carried a strange balance, authority so powerful it filled the room, yet calm enough that no one felt the need to run. She stopped a few steps away from Owen and studied him. You did not know who she was. No. You did not ask. No. You did not request payment. Owen shook his head. She was hungry. The Queen's eyes shifted toward Mira, who stood proudly beside Owen like a scientist presenting a successful experiment. Mira tells me this was a test. Yes, Mira said. A test you invented. Yes. Queen Vessa sighed softly. I suspected that. She turned back to Owen. My daughter believes you passed. Owen raised one hand. I would like to point out that I did not volunteer for any testing programs. Mira leaned closer. That makes the results more honest. That is not comforting. Queen Vessa's expression warmed slightly again. You seem very calm for someone standing in the palace after unknowingly feeding the princess. Owen thought about that. I would not describe myself as calm. No, I am experiencing what humans call delayed panic. Mira laughed. Queen Vessa folded her hands behind her back. I reviewed the surveillance recording from the market. Owen groaned quietly. There was surveillance. There is always surveillance. That is concerning. You hesitated before giving the cake. Yes. Why? I was deciding if it was my dinner. And then? I realized she looked hungrier than I was. The Queen tilted her head slightly. That is an unusual calculation. Owen shrugged. I work with food. It changes how you think about things. How so? If someone is hungry, that problem should probably be solved before complicated questions? Mira nodded enthusiastically. Exactly. Queen Vessa looked at her daughter. You ran a social experiment. Yes. You disabled palace security. Yes. You entered the outer market alone. Yes. And you located a baker. Mira gestured proudly toward Owen. He passed. The Queen looked at Owen again. Do you know how many people in the city would have reacted differently? Owen thought for a moment. Many? Almost everyone. Owen scratched his head. That seems inefficient. In what way? If someone is hungry and you have cake, the math is simple. Queen Vessa was silent for a moment. Then she began walking slowly around the chamber. Owen noticed that everyone else in the room subtly adjusted their position to follow her movement without blocking her view. She stopped near the tall windows overlooking the city. Ruling a dominion, she said quietly, means most people speak to me carefully. Every word is weighed, every action calculated. Owen nodded. That sounds exhausting. It is. She turned slightly toward him. My daughter wanted to observe someone who did not know who she was. That explains the experiment. Yes. And the armored security ships. That part was not part of the experiment. Owen sighed. I suspected that. Mira raised a finger. The ships arrived later. That does not improve the story. Queen Vessa looked between them. You seem comfortable speaking honestly. Owen shrugged. I am a baker. Diplomacy is not part of my training. That may be why you succeeded. By accident. Often the best results are accidental. Mira nodded again. Exactly. The queen returned to the center of the chamber. You shared your food without expecting reward. Yes. You treated the princess like any other child. Yes. You did not panic when the guards arrived. Owen coughed. That last part is slightly inaccurate. You froze. That was tactical thinking, Mira whispered loudly. He looked like a statue. An observant statue, Owen corrected. Queen Vessa smiled again. A guard near the door quietly whispered to another guard. Owen caught part of it. I have never seen the queen smile twice in one meeting. Owen whispered back to Mira. That feels important. It is. The queen returned her attention to Owen. Tell me something. Yes? If you had known she was the princess? Yes? Mira, would you still have given her the cake? Owen thought about that carefully, then he nodded. Yes. Why? Because she still would have been hungry. The chamber became quiet again. Even the hovering palace drones seemed to pause. Queen Vessa studied him for several seconds. Then she said calmly, My daughter has decided you are trustworthy. That sounds dangerous. She also appears to enjoy your company. That sounds more dangerous. Mira grinned. Queen Vessa turned slightly toward Commander Tarek. Commander. Yes, Your Majesty. Cancel the investigation. Owen blinked. There was an investigation? There was. That seems dramatic. Royal security prefers caution. Mira looked very satisfied. Queen Vessa faced Owen again. You will not be punished. Owen exhaled slowly. That is excellent news. Instead, the Queen continued, I would like to thank you. Owen stared. For cake. For kindness. Mira raised her hand again. And for passing the test. Owen looked at both of them. I feel like the test was not explained clearly. Queen Vessa smiled faintly. Few important tests ever are. The quiet in the chamber lasted only a moment after the Queen spoke, but to Owen it felt much longer. Not punished, that was good. Very good. He had spent the entire trip to the palace imagining the opposite outcome. Still, the situation had not become simple. Standing in the middle of the royal palace while the queen of an interstellar dominion thanked you for cake was not something a normal baker prepared for. Owen scratched the back of his neck. Well, he said carefully, this is easily the strangest thank you conversation I've ever had. Mira laughed. Queen Vessa regarded him calmly. You expected punishment. Yes. Why? Because that is how most stories about accidentally feeding royalty usually end. That sounds like a very specific category of stories. It is surprisingly common in my imagination. Mira folded her arms with exaggerated seriousness. You worry too much. I worry exactly the correct amount, Owen replied. Your experiment involved armored ships. Commander Tarek, who had been standing silently near the entrance, cleared his throat slightly. The ships were a response to the missing princess alert. Owen nodded. Yes, that part. Mira looked pleased. It was very efficient. Efficient panic, Owen said. Queen Vessa stepped closer again, her movements quiet and controlled. Despite the calm tone of the room, her presence still carried weight. the kind that made even the floating palace drones adjust their paths slightly. "You seem uncomfortable with the attention," she said. "I run a bakery stall," Owen replied. "My usual audience consists of dock workers and one repair drone that complains about sugar levels." Mira brightened. "I like the drone. It complains less than most customers." The Queen tilted her head slightly. "You speak freely. I have discovered that careful speeches do not come naturally to me." "That may be why Mira likes you." Mira nodded enthusiastically. "He answers questions normally." Owen looked at her. "How many people do not answer questions normally?" She thought for a moment. "Most diplomats." "That seems accurate." Queen Vessa turned and gestured toward a nearby seating area built into the floor of the chamber. Smooth circular benches surrounded a low table that glowed faintly with soft blue light. "Sit," she said. Owen hesitated. "Are visitors allowed to sit in the royal chamber?" "Yes." "Without filling out a form?" "Yes." "Excellent." He sat carefully. Mira immediately dropped into the seat beside him. The Queen remained standing for a moment before joining them. Commander Tarek stayed near the doorway, though Owen noticed the commander's expression had softened slightly. The crisis was clearly over, though the guards still looked uncertain what to do with a baker who had accidentally passed a royal character evaluation. Queen Vessa folded her hands on the table. Mira explained her reasoning. Owen glanced at Mira. "She did." "Yes, she wished to observe how someone would behave if they believed they were helping a stranger." "That still feels like a risky research method." "It was," the Queen said calmly. Mira shrugged. "It worked." Owen looked around the chamber. "Well, technically, yes." The Queen's eyes rested on him again. "You did not try to gain advantage from the situation." "No, you did not try to sell the story. That idea arrived much later." Mira leaned toward him. "You could sell the story," Owen whispered. "Let us not discuss that in front of the Queen." Queen Vessa's mouth curved slightly. "I am not offended by humor." "That is reassuring. You helped without expectation." "I shared food." "That is exactly what I mean." Owen looked thoughtful for a moment. "When you work with food," he said slowly, "you see things differently." "How so?" "If someone is hungry, that problem should probably be solved before complicated questions about identity." The Queen studied him again, as if trying to understand how such a simple thought could exist so easily. Many people would have asked who she was first. "That feels backwards." "Why?" "Because if the answer had been important person, then suddenly helping would look like ambition." The chamber fell quiet again. Mira watched him with interest. "You did not think about that." "No." Queen Vessa nodded slightly. "That is precisely what makes it valuable." Owen blinked. "Valuable?" "Yes. I only gave away my dinner." "Exactly." Mira suddenly leaned forward, her eyes bright with an idea. "Owen should come back." Owen looked at her. "Come back where?" "The palace." "That sounds dangerous." "To visit." Queen Vessa raised one eyebrow. "Mira." "Yes?" "You are inviting the baker to the palace." "Yes." "You met him today." "Yes." "You evaluated his character through pastry distribution." "Yes." The Queen paused. Owen quietly whispered to Mira, "This conversation is worrying." "It will be fine." Queen Vessa turned her gaze to Owen again. "My daughter appears to have adopted you." Owen nearly choked. "That was not discussed," Mira grinned. "You passed the test." "I feel like the test has ongoing consequences." The Queen exhaled softly, though the faint smile returned. "Mira rarely finds people who speak to her without calculation." Owen shrugged. "I did not know she was royalty." "That helped." Mira leaned back in her seat. "Owen also argues with ovens." "That was a private moment." Queen Vessa looked mildly curious. "You argue with ovens?" "They start it." Commander Tarek coughed quietly near the doorway. The Queen looked toward him briefly, then back to Owen. "You are unusual." "That is a polite way of saying strange." "Yes," Owen sighed. "Well, Your Majesty, if it helps, I promise not to start any revolutions." "That was not one of my concerns." "That is good." The Queen rested one hand lightly on the table. Mira's experiment asked a simple question. Owen waited. Would someone help a child without asking who she was? That seems like a question with a simple answer. It does not often receive one. Mira pointed at him proudly. He passed. Owen looked around the enormous palace chamber again. Well, he said slowly, I suppose sharing cake can lead to unexpected career changes. 3 weeks later, Owen was arguing with the palace kitchen. More specifically, he was arguing with a hovering royal cooking unit that looked like a polished metal sphere with 6 delicate mechanical arms. I am telling you, Owen said, pointing a wooden spoon at it, that temperature is too high. The machine responded with a soft mechanical voice. Current heat level is mathematically optimal. It is emotionally dangerous. Emotion is not part of baking protocol. That explains why your bread tastes like polite disappointment. The machine paused. Recalculating. Behind Owen, several palace chefs watched the conversation with a mixture of fascination and disbelief. One of them whispered quietly, He's correcting the royal cooking unit. Another whispered back, and it's listening. The sphere lowered its temperature slightly. Owen nodded. See? Cooperation. The chef beside him shook his head slowly. You have been here 3 days, and you have already convinced the kitchen machines to negotiate. I am not convinced they were designed properly, Owen replied. The palace kitchen was enormous, larger than Owen's entire bakery district back in the market ring. Rows of intelligent cooking units prepared meals for diplomats, guards, palace staff, and occasionally the queen herself. At the far end of the room, Mira sat on a counter swinging her legs while eating something that strongly resembled Owen's pastries, which was impressive, because Owen had made them. That morning, in the royal kitchen, the door slid open quietly. Queen Vessa stepped inside. Immediately, the chef straightened. Mira waved cheerfully. Owen nearly dropped the spoon. Your Majesty, he said, attempting a quick bow that almost collided with the cooking unit. Queen Vessa's expression softened slightly. You appear busy. I am attempting to teach your kitchen machines that bread has feelings. That is not part of their programming. It should be. The hovering unit rotated slowly. Bread does not possess emotions. Owen pointed at it. That attitude is exactly the problem. Mira laughed. Queen Vessa observed the room for a moment before stepping closer to the preparation table. You seem to have adjusted quickly. Owen shrugged. I'm still confused. About what? I shared one cake. Yes, and now I am teaching royal kitchen systems about emotional baking. That is accurate. I feel like there were missing steps in the process. Mira hopped off the counter and walked over. You also passed the test. I did not know it was a life-changing test. Queen Vessa rested one hand lightly on the table. Tests often are. For a moment, the room grew quiet. Outside the tall windows, the city of Aurelian spread across the horizon like a living network of light. Cargo ships moved in slow patterns through the sky lanes. Far above them, the Royal Defense Fleet drifted silently in orbit. Owen followed her gaze. You rule all of that. Yes. That seems complicated. It is. Mira leaned against the table. That is why Mother likes honest people. Queen Vessa looked down at her daughter. I like useful perspectives. Then her attention returned to Owen. When Mira left the palace that day, she wanted to prove something. That strangers can be kind. Yes, she succeeded. Partially. Owen blinked. Partially? You prove kindness exists without calculation. That seems like a good result. It is. The queen paused for a moment. But the more interesting result came afterward. Owen frowned slightly. Afterward? You were brought to the palace. Yes. You did not attempt to impress anyone. I did not know how. You did not attempt to gain advantage. That felt awkward. You treated everyone here exactly the same. Owen thought about that. Well, you're all people. Mira pointed at the cooking unit. That one is not. It is trying very hard. Queen Vessa smiled faintly. That honesty is rare here. Owen scratched his head. I'm still a baker. Yes. And my bakery stall is currently unattended. Mira brightened. We can visit it. Queen Vessa nodded. You will. Owen blinked. I will? Yes. She folded her hands behind her back. You will continue running your bakery. That sounds reasonable. But She continued calmly, "You will also visit the palace." Owen stared. "To bake? To talk? That seems inefficient." "Mira enjoys your company." Mira nodded enthusiastically. "And I find your perspective useful." Owen looked between them. "So my official role is accidental advisor?" Queen Vessa considered that. "That is an acceptable description." Owen leaned against the table. "Well," he said slowly, "that is not the career path I expected this morning." Mira grinned. "It started with cake. That seems to be the pattern." The cooking unit rotated again. "Bread temperature stable." Owen nodded approvingly. "See? Progress." Queen Vessa looked toward the window again, watching the distant movement of ships in the sky. Then she said quietly, "In this palace, people often give gifts expecting something in return." Owen listened. "You gave something without knowing who you were helping. It was cake. It was kindness." Mira leaned happily against Owen's arm. Queen Vessa turned back toward them. "And sometimes," she said softly, "the most valuable gifts in a galaxy are the ones given by people who do not know they are giving them." Owen looked at Mira, then at the enormous palace kitchen, then at the city beyond the windows. Finally, he sighed. "Well," he said, "next time I'm baking 2 cakes." Mira laughed. Queen Vessa smiled. And somewhere in the corner of the royal kitchen, the cooking unit quietly lowered the oven temperature. Just in case the bread had feelings after all.